Welcome to another episode of Engineering Our Future podcast. I'm Nicolai with Luis. What a beautiful Monday morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been a little colder than I wanted here in South Dakota, but you can't complain.
That's great. It is definitely not cold here in Arizona, and but the weather is really great. It rained a little bit the last few days, and I think it's going to heat back up here into the 80s. So a little warmer than usual, but it's still a good Monday. But yeah. So today we're going to be talking about communication, but mostly regarding things that are not spoken. Not necessarily the words that you're saying, but maybe how you look when you say it, maybe how it comes out. Have some tips on virtual communications as well. So I'm really excited to kind of share some tips and tricks that we've learned. I think you're excited about this topic too. I don't know about you, but I get misunderstood a lot. Like, especially when I'm talking at home, but at work too, I have to be very careful with how I say certain things. And again, not just the words that we say, but how we say it. So I guess maybe let's start with the easier part of this conversation, which would be like the physical look, maybe body language or stuff like that. Anything in particular first comes out into mind when you're talking about communication and body language?
Yeah, I think the main thing, especially if you are in person at the office and you kind of have the ability to be kind of face to face, some of these things may be a little easier, like eye contact and making sure you are attentive to when someone is talking to you, like make sure you're actually listening and like looking at them and whatnot. But if you're in a meeting and you're sitting, like don't just be like laying back and doing some weird things or like putting feet at the table. Like those cues may not be the greatest or the way you want to transmit your communication. So like keep an eye on those little things. There's a lot of research on like if you like touch your nose, are you interested? If you're like rubbing your eyes, like or yawning during the meeting, like things like that, maybe a little more complex. I don't think we're gonna be touching about that here, but just gonna be more basic, like keeping eye contact when you're talking, like actually listening. Those cues kind of show that you're actually interested in the communication. And I think we'll touch a little bit more later on kind of the virtual aspect, which is a little more complicated and something that I have personally had to navigate over the past almost 3 years now that I've been working fully remote. So do you have any thoughts kind of to kick us off or anything
Yeah. Yeah, I love the eye contact for sure. That goes a long ways. It shows somebody that you're paying attention. I mean, I wish I didn't even have to say this, but put your phone down, it's like, and again, with the virtual conversation, we can see when you pick up your phone and you're clearly not looking at your keyboard, like you're looking way down, but we'll get to that. So, I mean, putting your phone down, I actually like Simon Sinek. He has some really, really good material, but he even says it's not great when you're at a lunch meeting or at some conference meeting, we're all in a big conference room together at work, and everybody comes in, they're like, oh, I'm not going to look at my phone, so I'm going to put it face down on the table. But still, just the fact that it's present, can be, well, I'm not fully here. This is still my priority. This is still my phone. This is what's going to get my attention as soon as you stop talking. Whereas if it's in your phone or just leave it at your desk, whatever, it goes a long ways. But even, like sitting up straight when I was younger, definitely did not have the best posture. I actually had a lot of, not self-doubt, but just I didn't see myself as kind of like a stronger person or see myself as somebody who had a lot to contribute. So I would just shrink a lot, right? And my body language would show that. And so my parents, when I was in high school or something like that, just called me out on it and said, you need to, sit up straight with your back, straight with your shoulders up, and just kind of taught me that a little bit. And it took me a long time to practice, but I do feel like my natural state is more of a confident looking body language. So those are things. What about a smile? What do you think? I have some thoughts on a smile, but do you think that goes a long ways or not really?
It kind of depends on the situation. If you're in a meeting and a work meeting and you're trying to like get something done, like I feel like if you're like smiling the whole time, may look a little different than if you were just kind of focus on like paying attention and not have like a frown on your face the whole time, but just like be engaged in the conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely don't think you need to be sitting at your conference table showing your pearly whites the whole time with a big old smile on your face. Yeah, that would be maybe a little awkward. There's a difference when you kind of have like a frown face versus a nice little relaxed smile there. I think, like you said, the friendliness of it. When I'm on the phone, I try to have a smile, at least when I'm greeting, because it kind of, I think people really can feel it and they can hear it in your voice. You know, you speak a little differently when you are trying to smile and be just more pleasant in general, right? If I'm giving feedback to somebody, even if it's good feedback, like, hey, you did a really good job, but I'm doing it with a really stern face, that doesn't help. The way you receive it is definitely more harsh than maybe they intended, or vice versa, right? I might be saying something and they're just like, wow, did you really mean it like that? And it was, and it was just my tone. I wasn't really thinking about how I said it, right? So I'll give a quick example of that. Even this just happened yesterday, where, my wife is a stay-at-home mom. She homeschools our kids. She's around our kids a lot. And she often needs a little bit of a break, and she never asks for one, but we try to give her a break where she can just maybe just get out of the house, go shopping, something like that. Yesterday, when I was like, hey, we have a few hours, why don't you just go take off for a few hours and just decompress, whatever you need. And her response was just like, yes, like, get me out of this house, just but she didn't say get me out of this house, but the way she said yes, and then whatever word she said after that, the tone to me spoke so much stronger to me that I took it as get me out of this house. And then I was like, whoa, did you mean it like that? And she goes, no, absolutely not. And, but again, it was just the tone plays a big factor. Here at work, I might say something on a project and somebody might say, ooh, did you mean it like that? But it's good when they ask that question versus just assuming I did mean it like that. Do you have any, not issues, but do you have any stories or thoughts on the tone of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk to kids, sometimes they perceive it in a different ways. I'm starting to notice that a little bit more once they start getting older. So our oldest is 6 right now, almost 7. So the way we talk to them, like depending on the situation, like if they're doing something wrong, like it's more assertive and more maybe like direct. And if they're doing something, they're showing us something, like you're more like just kind of sitting down with them, and whatnot. So I started noticing just kind of the way maybe sometimes a little more assertive than they want to hear it. And it's like, don't yell at me, or like, you're being mean to me, and like things like that. So sometimes the communication is more also how the other person perceives it. So depending on who you're talking to, which I think we talked about this on the previous episode on communication in terms of like how you transmit the message depending on who is receiving it. A lot of times is even more important than how it's transmitted. So kind of watching those little things, and I think obviously with kids they will tell you right away like this is how I'm feeling. But with adults, you kind of just kind of internalize it and maybe like put it to the side and not really give it the attention that it needs. But if you use the wrong tone in the wrong situation, you can start seeing some issues and some kind of communication issues kind of happening right there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I definitely see that. So another, again, just recent story. I was talking to a friend of mine. He works at a small firm, a very, very small firm. It's local. The owner of that firm may be considering selling to a few of the younger staff in the company, which is great. Uh, my friend being one of them. But the owner of the firm is a very harsh individual. you know, he has some amazing input. He has, when he speaks, I listen. Like I've always respected him in the industry and things that he says, the content that he says, but he sounds like the biggest jerk. And I hate to say that, but he sounds like the biggest jerk when he says it. And he like belittles people with his tone and just the way he presents the information. So anyways, my friend was asking kind of the perception of the company and just trying to get an outsider's perspective. And so I was sharing and that came up and we had a good laugh because it was definitely no secret that this person has hard times with tone and the way things are said. But but yeah, it's a big deal, and especially in business. I've heard relationships have really struggled because of somebody. It wasn't necessarily what they were saying, but how they were saying it, and it just didn't. Nobody asked, "Hey, is this what you meant?" It just kind of it hit them and they just kind of ran with it, and I've seen relationships break up that way. So it's really important in our work for sure to just watch the tone. So all right, so we have body language, sitting up straight, watching where your phone is, sitting attentive. Oh, another thing on body language is I've heard when you lean in, you're saying don't put your feet on the table. Obviously you can't lean in if your feet are up on the table. Hopefully nobody ever actually does that. But there's sometimes in a meeting where I'm just like, oh, I'm so tired. Let me just kind of put that recliner on the chair and I kind of lean way back. And it doesn't really show the speaker that I'm really into them, right? I might be, but it doesn't show the speaker that, right? And I think when we are listening and you have somebody speaking, we want to show them enough respect to lean in, to give them a good posture. So I think leaning in also goes a long ways. Any last things on body language?
We can touch a little bit on like the virtual aspect, just kind of the like keep an eye contact. So like right now, if you're watching this on video, you can see I'm looking at the camera, so like I'm making that eye contact. But if I'm looking at you, like it doesn't
Right.
like I'm actually having the eye contact. So I think you had a nice trick of just moving your camera close to or like your window close to the camera, so you're kind of looking like you're looking at the person. I've always like would love to have like a teleprompter where you kind of have the screen, but it's like a mirror that you can like see at people's eye, but the lens is behind
Hmm.
it. So it's a little more like you kind of having that conversation. Cause yeah, it feels weird, especially when you're like talking to someone and you're on camera and you're like, both of you maybe have are your laptops and you're like looking down, but the camera's like up here. So it's like just kind of that the weird thing happening. And I've tried to be a little more conscious, especially when I'm leading a meeting or giving a presentation of like actually like looking at the camera. Obviously that's never perfect or anything, but it gives the other person the impression that you are actually like looking at them, and I think it's a more powerful way to do it. The other thing is just kind of the maybe like yeah, your posture. Obviously you're sitting up and like same things can apply when you're kind of the virtual world, making sure you are just attentive and looking at least at the camera. Like sometimes you can see people are on meetings like scrolling or like typing, you can like hear the stuff in the background, like all of that. I think that gives a perception that you're not paying attention. And obviously, since COVID, a lot of people having these virtual calls. A high percentage of people are trying to multitask during those calls. But at the same time, I think you need to be showing kind of your kind of if you want in person, basically. That's kind of how I see it sometimes. The other thing that has been a lot challenging as well is when you are on a meeting, but you don't have your camera on. Have you experienced that a little bit and just how to navigate that? I think that's something very common kind of these days, especially with tons of meetings happening and all virtual meetings.
This one's a hard one. I should have anticipated you asking me that question, but I have a pretty strong opinion that you should have your camera on. And honestly, if you can't have your camera on, then why, if you can't have it on, why be in the meeting, right? I feel it's a sign of respect. I feel, especially if you're not the presenter. If you're the presenter and you don't have your camera on, ugh, that gets to me. Now, sure, I understand there's bandwidth issues and all those sorts of things. There are some times where I'm in a meeting, I have my camera on, and people are like, "Hey, Nicolai, you keep freezing up, so why don't you turn your camera off?" I totally will do that, right? Having your camera on should just be automatic. Now, if it's a quick call, hey, team, let's do a quick huddle. Nobody has their camera on, that's different too. But if you're in a meeting, definitely have it on. If you're in a strategy, meeting where it was set up, more than hours ago, have it on. If you're in a meeting and you turn it off temporarily, but then it's your turn to speak, turn it on when you're speaking so people can kind of see you. Again, it just adds to the language, it adds to the communication because I might be talking and you can't see my face. And especially don't joke and then not have your camera on either because people might not see it as a joke, right? And if they see you have a big smile on your face or have a goofy look, then they know you're joking, but definitely be careful without when you have your camera off. Have you seen the new cameras? And this is definitely not a plug for these cameras. I have no idea if they're good or not, but it's a camera that plugs in and then has like a stick that goes down to the middle of your screen, and the camera is actually there, like right in the middle of your screen. Have you seen that?
I've seen those. Yeah, I haven't looked at them too much, but yeah, I've seen those.
It's a great idea. First off, I think it's a amazing idea. I just, who knows if they, how well they actually work. I actually hate using my laptop camera for our podcast when, I'm outside of my house. So I should just buy a $40, little cheap camera to put up. That way I'm looking up rather than like staring down. Talking about being on camera when you're talking, if you're watching this on YouTube or some way of watching this podcast, and you see me looking down right now, I'm looking down at my keyboard and clearly not looking at the screen or the camera. But it's even worse if I'm looking even more down because I'm looking at my phone that's a foot away from the screen, and everybody knows what you're doing, and so just be aware of that. It's not necessarily even it's more of just like the respect that you're showing to the person that you're talking to. The last one that gets me when I'm on virtual meetings is when you get a Teams message or you get an Outlook message and it pops up in the corner of your screen, and you see that person's eyes go to the corner of their screen, and they're reading it while you're talking to them. You're like, I know what you're, just let me pause, read your message, and then let me go. Right? Oh, that gets to me too. One of my bosses, I would be in person in the office with him, but he was glued to emails. I mean, he had inbox zero. His inbox was like, he was so good at responding so fast, but I would be in his office with him and something would pop up and he would just totally lose focus on me and go to that. It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of like being present in the conversation. And if you're not being present in the conversation, it affects people. There's my rant. Sorry, you got me all flustered, Luis, with that question.
No, that's just something that I've been thinking a lot about. I mean, at a previous job, I think everyone was like, yeah, with cameras on. Most of the people work at the office, and I've started to notice, especially during like big ASC meetings, like not a lot of people use the cameras, and obviously sometimes these meetings are like, well, you have like 20 people, you're not really like actively participating, you're kind of sitting in the background. I think that's fine. I mean, if you're not just kind of actively participating, you can just have your camera off and just kind of listen in. I agree that at times when you're like, especially like smaller meetings, when you're like and trying to get maybe something done, it's nice to have the camera on. I've started to sometimes like not have the camera on. I just assume it's just a phone call. Like if you call me on the phone, like I'm not gonna, oh no, let's FaceTime. Like we're just having a phone call. It's quick. We're just gonna talk for 5 minutes, get everything done, and just gonna move on. So I think again, there's like a context of where you should have the camera on, what ways will benefit having the camera on, which ways maybe it's just a quick phone call that if I'm gonna call you in the middle of the day, I'm not gonna FaceTime you and talk for 5 minutes and just move on. Sometimes it's just easier to have the phone call and yeah, just kind of it's different situations, kind of what you were saying, especially when you're again trying to get something done. It's nice to have the camera on at times.
There are probably hundreds of things we could go deeper onto here, or add to the conversation. I wish we had time for all of that, but I think we covered all of the key items that we had discussed before. I think for me to summarize my point of the day is a lot of the communication, not necessarily the tone. I mean, even the tone, I guess, does apply, but a lot of the communication that we were talking today is really more a respect of the person you're talking with, showing them that you're engaged, not because you want to say, hey, look at, I'm engaged, but it's like, hey, you're important enough to me and to this conversation that I'm going to be present and I'm going to be looking at you, nodding my head when you're speaking, engaging with you. I'm fully present in this conversation, and that person will definitely feel that, because I know when you don't do that, they definitely feel that, right? Yeah, like you heard on my rant. So yeah, I hope that we can kind of move forward that way. It's not that we're trying to be strict or say, oh, you must do this. It's more of just, hey, this is a respect for that other person. I think that's the way I would like to summarize my part of the conversation. What about you? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of having, especially engineers. I think we are pretty reserved. We just kind of, I think of a presentation on a conference. You kind of sit behind the podium, maybe your arms kind of crossed, and you're just kind of talking, maybe reading from the slide. That nonverbal communication it's fine sometimes for these presentations, but if you want to be more engaging, maybe you step outside the podium, maybe you walk around, maybe you like use your hands more. Like there's a lot of ways that you could improve that communication in general, not verbal and non-verbal. Just having the what do you even say, the kind of the understanding that when you're transmitting the message is a piece of it. Like how you move, how you look at people, how you tone your voice when you're trying to share something makes a huge difference. And I think as engineers, we struggle with that. I still struggle with that a lot. But you start becoming more aware of these things and you start looking at how you are communicating. And I think that helps a lot at the end of the day. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our newsletter. Every issue comes packed with information about the episode that we recorded, giving you detailed action items as well as just reflection on some of the things that you could apply in your career, in your life. And I always enjoy sitting down on a Sunday, Saturday sometimes, and writing down each newsletter. Comes packed with a lot of information, a lot of links, a lot of great lessons and knowledge that we share both in the podcast, but I'll try to go a little deeper into that connection. So if you are interested in that at all, go to luisfelipeduque.com/newsletter. All the information is there. I'm excited for the podcast and where it's going. So I want you to know about that resource as well. Nicolai and I put a lot of effort in the podcast and we're enjoying the conversations. And as well, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, go to the link in the description below or luisfelipeduque.com/contact. Let's connect. We're happy to provide you with all the information you need and always excited to have that conversation as well. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.